Today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
In the next several days to a week or so, we're going to continue to see things go up. We cannot be discouraged by that because the mitigation is actually working.
The unvaccinated overcrowd our hospitals. I'm moving forward with vaccination requirements wherever I can.
Welcome to COVID Secrets. This is Jonathan Otto. Welcome to this bonus episode. If you've been following our COVID Secrets docu-series so far, you might already have concluded that the COVID vax is nothing short of a bioweapon. The government, big pharma, and medical authorities have gone to crazy lengths to convince the public that COVID is deadly and that there are no effective treatments. They manipulated data to make people believe that the COVID-related death rates were much higher than they really were, also that people would believe the jab was the only solution. But what we've discovered is that the vax is ineffective and extremely deadly, and it's costing hundreds of thousands of lives. It's anticipated that these death rates will continue to rise as the spike protein continues to cause damage in the bodies of those who have been vaccinated. There's no way this is a coincidence, since the science behind it is so intelligent and so complex, and it's clear that this thing has been designed as a bioweapon. Our first expert is Dr. Daniel Newsom, and he reveals how the COVID vaccine has been called the dirtiest vaccine ever created by experts who have 30 to 40 years of experience working with vaccines. He talks about how the contaminants in this vaccine are causing the body to become highly toxic. He also talks about how the mRNA technology used in these vaccines is causing the body to become a spike protein manufacturer, causing an autoimmune response, and this is causing serious harm.
Dr. Newsom, okay, now let's talk about the mechanism of what's going on, you think, with this vaccine. Is it what they say? Is it this messenger RNA or modified RNA in the body, and this is what's causing the body to reproduce the spike protein, and that's what's causing people to shut down? Or have they snuck something else into this vaccine, like put some like shellfish poison in it, and that's what's causing the organs to shut down? Because these reactions to me look like people got stung by a jellyfish or something as well. Like, it's all kinds of things. I'm kind of joking a little bit, but I'm kind of serious. Because, you look at that heart attack gun that was created by the CIA, and they could shoot you with that dart that was like a hair, and they show it in court, and it's shellfish that's poisoning you and causing you to have a heart attack. It's the heart attack gun. So, and if it is a bioweapon, then what would they be doing, what they'd be using? And if that were true, then what could we use to help neutralize it and turn it off? What do you think? Is my thought process completely in fantasy land?
Here's what, the vaccine manufacturers that I've talked to, the people that actually make vaccines, when they look at the batches of vaccines, when you take the ingredients, take them out of the vial, put it under a microscope, and they actually take a look at what's in there. They're saying that these are the dirtiest vaccines they've ever seen. Okay. In their entire careers. Some of these people have been doing this for 30, 40 years. And they're saying they're the dirtiest vaccines, meaning they have the highest amount of contaminants. Okay, so there's more things in there that shouldn't be there than they've ever produced before. Okay. And the quality controls on these were all halted. Maybe they just get the product out there, regardless of whether it's clean or safe. Just get it out there.
Were they rushing that because they were trying their best to save the public? Were they rushing it because they were just trying to make some money? Were they rushing it because it wasn't actually rushed at all, and it was the premise by which, a disguise by which they could unleash a biological weapon by having people think that they were doing this in a quick warp speed reaction? Instead, it was the perfect disguise for a bioweapon. Which one do you think?
I would say yes. I think it's probably a little bit of all of the above. This wasn't done by one person. There's 25 companies that are producing these mRNA vaccines for COVID-19. We hear about the big ones, but there's 25 different companies that I know of that are producing these vaccines. And they're, again, everyone that I've talked to that's in the quality control areas, they're saying these are the dirtiest vaccines they've ever seen. So they have the most contaminants. That's just something in the industry. That's the scuttlebutt, okay, out there that people are reporting. There's, these are very, very dirty vaccines. Number one. Okay, so we have contaminants. We have more contaminants than usual. And that is going to cause a inflammatory response. Okay, anytime you get a wound and contaminants get into that wound, you're going to have an inflammatory response to that. It's a normal, natural bodily response. It's a part of your immune system responding, trying to protect you. What happens is, normally we don't have toxins injected into us. That's not normally how you would get, infiltrated by a toxin. It's not normally injected into you. Okay, so this speeds up that reaction because the constituents going into the system are actually being injected right into your system. They're not going straight into the bloodstream, but they're going right into your system, and your body is going to respond to that. It's going to respond. It's almost a toxic shock type response to those toxins. That's one. The next thing we need to talk about, though, is what that messenger RNA is doing. What program are they inserting? Because that's what it is. It's like taking you're taking a disk and putting it into your computer, adding a new program. Or you're downloading a new app to your computer. That's exactly what's happening with this. And what is that programming? What does it do? Well, they're designed to tell your cells to produce a toxic protein. I don't understand how anyone thinks that's safe, first off. Why would you want your cells to produce more toxins? That makes no sense to me. That's what spike proteins are. They're toxic proteins. So that's something that, as that infiltrates your DNA and becomes a system-wide program, every cell, every tissue in your body before too long is going to be producing this toxic protein. The presence of that toxic protein, there's something real interesting for everybody to understand. The only things you can have an allergy or an allergic reaction against is a protein. You can be sensitive to everything, but you can only have an allergic response to a protein. So if your body starts producing a toxic protein, there is the chance that you can become allergic to your own body. Okay? If that happens, you're going to have a cytokine storm, and it could very well kill you. Okay, I believe that's exactly what we're seeing. Just go on YouTube, go look at all of the news reporters that are passing out or falling over, having strokes on TV. You can find it right on YouTube. It's available. You can find these videos. Look at all of the sports teams who, these soccer players or these basketball players, they get out there, start running around, start being active, and all of a sudden they're having full-on heart attacks. They're dying they're dead before they fall on the ground. You can find videos of all those types of things. It's terrible. That's not normal. That's not a normal response. But if the body goes into an anaphylactic reaction against itself, that is a normal response. That's what it would look like. Okay, so we're seeing that. Okay, so we know that that's what this mRNA does. There's another whole another piece to this that I think is very diabolical. Is in order to get messenger RNA into the system, and prevent the immune system from utterly destroying it, which it should, okay, you have to deactivate a specific protein in the immune system called toll-like proteins. Toll, like a toll booth, okay? Toll-like proteins. These is super important to understand. Toll-like proteins act like a toll booth, okay? Think of, okay, here's your toll-like protein. You got a healthy cell come through, okay, it lets it through the toll booth, right? Another healthy cell, okay, you come through, okay, another healthy cell, you come through. Oh, cancer cell, wait a minute, no, you can't go through, park over here, okay? Oh, virus infected cell, wait a minute, you can't go through, park over here, okay? So it works like a toll booth or a toll, on a toll road, right? These toll-like proteins have to be deactivated because they would also detect foreign messenger RNA. So you have to deactivate that component of the immune system in order to get the messenger RNA to go into the system, make it into the system, and actually get integrated into the system. Okay? Now, if you listen to what I'm saying, what is it that toll-like proteins do? They detect infections, particularly viral infections, and they detect cancer. If you talk to Dr. Ryan Cole, a friend of mine, he lives actually in the same town as me.
Did you guys connect fairly recently?
He's here. And you ask him.
Because I was telling him about you, and I was like, you've got to connect with Daniel Newsom. Did you guys get connected fairly recently, or what?
Yeah. Fairly. We've known of each other for quite a while, but he's a pathologist. And his job, his laboratory, here they take all of the biopsy samples and determine what's going on in folks. Are you dealing with an autoimmune disease? Is it a cancer? All that kind of stuff. So Idaho, our state is notoriously anti-vax. Okay, we're very, very non-compliant on the vaccine schedule. Let's just put it that way. We joke that our state is so Wild West. Even if you turn our state sideways, it looks like a pistol. So that's so. With Idaho, here's something interesting that Dr. Cole says. Our state has a 15% vaccine rate. Okay, with the COVID vaccines, with 15% of our population has had the vaccine. Okay. In the year and a half that we've had that vaccine available here in Idaho, our cancer rates have gone up 2,000%. The rate at which cancer is appearing in people has increased 2,000% in our tiny little population. Idaho we are just barely getting to 2 million inhabitants in our state. We're not a very large population here. We have a very small percentage, only 15% of our population has received the vaccines, the COVID vaccines, and we've had a 2,000%, that's a 20-time increase in cancer rates in the last year. Why? That's because that's not statistically possible. Okay, something happened here. Okay, that doesn't just they got better at diagnosing cancer. No, their diagnostic techniques haven't changed. They're doing the same techniques, same tests that they were doing 2 years ago. Only they're finding 20 times more cancer. Okay, well, a way to explain that is these poor folks don't have a toll booth on their toll road. Nothing there to detect whether or not they have cancer. And it's not until after cancer has already invaded and infiltrated their system do we start to find it. Okay, because they actually have a tumor growing somewhere. Okay, we have the same thing happening with post-vaccine. We're seeing reactivation of all kinds of viruses in people's systems. Things that were dormant, things like herpes or Epstein-Barr or any of the retroviruses, we're seeing those things come back to life again, even in people where they've been dormant for years, or they haven't had problems with any of those things for years and years. It comes back, and it comes back with a vengeance, because their toll-like proteins aren't working anymore. They've been deactivated. Okay, that's like taking the all the warning lights in your car and deactivating them. Okay, and maybe you're not real good at changing the oil, or maybe you're not good at figuring out how much gasoline you're using. And you don't have a warning light, so your car runs out of gas, your car runs out of oil, and it wrecks your engine. Okay, that's exactly what's happening to these people.
Throughout this episode, we'll also gain insight from Neil Miller, who has also done extensive research into the vaccines on this childhood vaccine schedule. He talks about how dangerous vaccines are in general and how they're causing high levels of toxicity in babies from their first jab. He also discusses a study that revealed that the majority of the serious illnesses that children deal with are largely due to the toxic vaccines that they're getting from in utero. We'll also hear from Dr. Brian Artis, who's passionate about advocating for children's health. We've heard from Dr. Artis discussing the serious effects and dangers of these vaxxers, especially for children. In this episode, he talks about how the CDC put out a warning to the entire media and American hospitals in August of 2020, saying that they should be on the lookout for paralyzed children coming into hospitals, and how there's a clear link that this would be related to the flu shot. He also talks about how this prediction is very likely to occur with the mRNA COVID-19 shots, and that the side effects could be permanent and life-threatening. Hi, it's Jonathan, and I'm glad that you're watching this bonus episode. And remember, all of these bonus episodes you'll get in the program, COVID Secrets, and I really look forward to seeing you inside the program. It's going to be life-changing. And remember, all the bonus gifts, the free gifts that have come with your order when you place it today. Now it's over $2,000 worth of free gifts inside of this program. And we're helping you with many different areas. We've got a whole program dedicated to autoimmune disease that normally you'd be paying $400 for it, but now you're getting it for free. The brain health series. Now this is profound. I spent years researching this subject area and releasing some of the best materials that exist on this subject, and inside of this program you get all of that for free. Again, worth $400, but you're getting it completely free, and so much more. I look forward to seeing you inside this program, and I can't wait to see the results that come into your life. Just click the buttons or the banner below this page to get started.
Hi guys, it's Jonathan Otto here, and I'm with Neil Miller, and he's been doing some really important work. He and Dr. Brian Hooker were presenting just yesterday, or today even, over here at this event, and some of their findings are really profound in regard to vaccinated versus unvaccinated. These studies really had been hard to find, hence that it made it hard for us to prove our case that events were happening to children that were damaging, because they would claim that, well, if you're unvaccinated, you'd be worse off, so it's the greater of two evils. But this is really the canary in the coal mine, and a very diagnostic element to show, hey, we know what's going on here with this issue. We know how children are being damaged and being harmed, not only just from the childhood schedule and as soon as they come into the world, but even before that. So Neil's here with us. Thank you so much for your life's work and what you're here to do and to share, and what that does for humanity. I appreciate you taking the time with me to help make the world a better place. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Jonathan. I really appreciate this opportunity to share information with everybody.
Awesome.
So, Dr. Brian Hooker and I collaborated on 2 papers. We started about 3 years ago. We had some medical doctors that had access to children that were coming into their practices, and these were medical doctors that were open to children that were both vaccinated and unvaccinated. And we had access to that data, and we were able to analyze it, and we were able to produce these 2 studies. And in the first study, we were able to find that children were approximately 4 times more likely to develop various negative health outcomes if they were vaccinated as compared to unvaccinated. These were children that developed allergies, children that developed gastrointestinal disorders, children that developed. We also looked at. Well, with the second study, we looked at autism, we looked at developmental disorders in that first study, and all of these various health conditions were authenticated.
Neil, do you mind telling me about your background, your study, your research, your credentials for the audience that are listening that maybe don't know who you are?
Yes, hi. My name is Neil Miller, and I've been doing I've been investigating vaccines for more than 30 years. My son was born in the mid 1980s, and at the time there wasn't a lot of research. And so when my wife became pregnant, I felt that it was necessary to do my due diligence. And we didn't have the internet at the time, so I went to the medical libraries to do my research. And I was flabbergasted at what I had discovered. And I began to collate and organize the information that I had found, and people began to ask me about that information. And I shared that information with other people. And that was the genesis of my first book, which was Vaccines, Are They Really Safe and Effective? That went on to sell more than 250,000 copies and was translated into 15 or 20 different languages. And then everything just snowballed from there. So I began to do lectures and speak out about vaccines. But my wife and I, we really intuitively knew that we were not going to be putting drugs into our children when they entered the world. I did everything naturally. My children never went to a medical doctor. We used a midwife. I caught my children when they entered the world. It was very, very beautiful. We were very holistic in how we raised our children, and I encourage everyone to do their due diligence. Now, at the time, nobody else was speaking out that I was aware of. Dr. Mendelsohn was writing a few newsletters. He was a medical doctor, pediatrician, but he was not documenting his work at the time, and that was a big difference in my work at the time, because I was actually documenting my work with scientific studies to support every statement that I made.
So now we've really had a lot less information. In the past, people such as yourself had to do research the old school way and go to libraries and stuff like that. I mean, I guess the internet kind of prolific when you were first researching, or not?
Oh no, internet was not available back when I began doing my research back in the mid to late 1980s. I mean, my son was born in 1984, so that's when I initially did my research. I began when my wife was pregnant. A lot of people don't do any research until their baby is born. And then they're told that they have to get this and that vaccine, and then they're highly pressured to get those vaccines, and then they are oftentimes regretful of what happens to their children if their children are harmed by those many vaccines. One of the main concerns that I have is with the childhood vaccine schedule. Here in the United States, in Australia, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, they require approximately 26 different vaccine doses by the time a child reaches 1 year of age. Now, the problem is that starting with pregnancy right now, health officials are recommending that pregnant women receive a mercury-containing flu vaccine, a aluminum-containing acellular pertussis vaccine, and so that baby in utero is being inundated with these heavy metals, and then when that child is born, at the hospital, if you have a hospital birth, that child is being dosed with with an aluminum-containing hepatitis B vaccine, and then at 2 months of age, that baby is receiving 8 different vaccines. Okay, this is a cocktail of vaccines and heavy metals again, because they're receiving an aluminum-containing hepatitis B vaccine, an aluminum-containing pneumococcal vaccine, an aluminum-containing acellular pertussis vaccine, the hepatitis B vaccine, and several other vaccines. And then at 4 months, they're receiving these aluminum-containing vaccines once again. And at 6 months again, they're receiving aluminum-containing vaccines. And here in the United States, they're also requiring a mercury-containing flu vaccine at 6 months, and then a second dose at 7 months of age. So the baby in utero during the mother's pregnancy, and then during the first 6 to 7 months of age, the baby is being overdosed with high concentrations of mercury and aluminum. And several studies, and in fact, I wrote a paper on aluminum, and I've also wrote a paper on the problems with giving multiple vaccines concurrently. And so these babies are being overdosed, and aluminum is a well-documented, scientifically documented neurotoxin, and it also has been linked to autoimmune disorders, and mercury has been linked to autistic behaviors and other neurological disorders as well.
Wow. So let's talk more about the issue with the mercury and the aluminum, or is there more aspects of these vaccines that are damaging?
Well, obviously there are other ingredients in these vaccines that are not something that you would want to take. Many of us in this community are very conscious of our health, and we're very aware of what we're putting into our bodies and what we do not want to have put into our bodies. And we do a lot of research, and there are obviously other ingredients in vaccines, but I think that just if we were to address the issue with mercury and the issues with mercury and aluminum, I think we would solve many of the safety issues, but not all of the safety issues. Another problem is, and I worked with Dr. Gary Goldman on a couple of studies back in 2011 and 2012. And in one of those studies, what we were able to show is that when children receive 8 vaccines, they are simultaneously, and that's what they're getting, like I said, at their 2, 4, and 6 month well baby visits. And when children receive 8 vaccines simultaneously, they are statistically significantly more likely to be hospitalized or die after receiving those vaccines than a child that receives seven vaccines simultaneously. And another finding that we found was that if the children receive 7 vaccines simultaneously, they're statistically significantly more likely to be hospitalized or die than a child that receives 6 vaccines at the same time. So what you have going on, and that was all the way down to 2 doses. So, a child that receives 3 doses is more likely to be hospitalized or die than a child that receives 2 doses. And what this is indicative of is that multiple vaccines given concurrently can create synergistic toxicity. And CDC, and we talk about in our paper, we document that the CDC itself has acknowledged that when pharmaceutical products are administered concurrently, so that when you have 2 or more products, the CDC is on the record as acknowledging that there is the potential for additive or synergistic toxicity. So this isn't just some rare finding that we discovered in our scientific paper. This is something that's well acknowledged by any toxicologist around the world. If you take 1 drug, there's risk of adverse reactions. If you take 2 drugs, then you're going to have additive or synergistic, the potential for additive or synergistic toxicity. And that's the problem. That's a big part of the problem. And I think that it's going to continue to be a problem, even if they were to be able to withdraw aluminum and mercury from vaccines. I think just the fact that these drugs are administered concurrently is going to continue to be a problem until they address that.
One of the things I was going to ask you about, a controversial video that was circulating on TikTok, and you were talking about the issue with the CDC making a warning for children.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, but like the fact checkers went after that as well. So like this gives you the
Who cares? They're not even healthcare professionals. Okay, great.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Fact check this.
All right. And let's see, the strongest argument was, I think that they were saying, well, like this, the time they said the CDC's thing was for fall of maybe 20.
It was in 2020.
Or
it was in 2020.
They said it for.
It was August 2020, and I was talking about this in the summer of 2021.
Yeah.
So they're like, no, this was the year prior.
Exactly. That's what they were thinking.
That's what they were saying.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was in August of 2020 or 2021. 2020.
The actual, the CDC came out and published to all hospitals and all media that there's going to be a polio-like illness among all children 5 years old in America between August 2020 and November 2020. So the U.S. News took it, ran it, blah, blah. I put up the publication on that, but
yeah,
they did that back in August of 2020.
Yeah.
They said it was going to occur then. And they were saying, the fact checkers were like, well, it didn't happen then. And Dr. Ars is misquoting. He's saying it's going to happen this year when the CDC warned it last year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So how do you respond?
I would love that.
How do you respond?
So actually, yeah, great question. So the CDC put out a warning to the entire media and to all of American hospitals. In August of 2020, they said, be on the lookout for paralyzed children coming into hospitals between August of 2020 and November 2020. And this alert went out in August of 2020. I was actually sent the U.S. News report on this warning from a group of doctors that are actually all a part of this COVID-19, trying to educate people about early treatment protocols. And they sent this to me. And when I saw it, I was like, they sent it to me in August of 2021. And when I got it, I was like, what? The CDC just pushed out this warning? The CDC is not prophets. How can they foresee that there's going to be a polio-like illness between now, which I was imagining, August 2021, and November of 2021? How can they actually say this? And there were 2 online publications who ran the same warning in August of 2021 that I saw. They were repeating the U.S. News report from 2020. So they were just repeating it and replaying it. And I did not know that they were quoting the U.S. News from a year earlier. However, I sure was glad I got those articles. This is what everyone needed to know. Because what I did, and I was fact checked by the USA Today. USA Today reached out to me and said, we want to fact check you on your claims that the CDC said in August of 2021 that there was going to be a polio-like illness in children in America between August 2021 and November 2021. Well, it is true that I misquoted the warning for August 2020, which is when they really did that statement. I was quoting 2 publications, online publications, that were actually publishing it in August of 2021. It was just a repeat of this warning. So when I actually was notified, I was like, you're right. But before I was even reached out by USA Today, I had already figured out why the CDC had actually put out this warning the year earlier and why it never happened. Okay, so the CDC puts out this warning. The reason why they put out the warning in August of 2020, you have to understand, the CDC put out this warning. There's only one thing that occurs that the CDC recommends every year between August and October 31st of every year. Do you know what that is?
Right.
That they recommend all people in America do
Flu shot.
between August and October 31st of every year. And it's getting the flu shot. Every other shot that the CDC recommends for all children is based around their birth dates, or the 6 months in between their birth dates, or when they start school, or whenever. But it's around school dates. The only one they recommend between August and October 31st is the flu shot. So it became very apparent to me, the only way the CDC would know that there's going to be this polio-like illness where kids are going to be paralyzed, being taken into hospitals that they warned about last year for this one period, would have to be related to the flu shots. Now, what they said in the warning is that it was occurring, this polio-like illness outbreak was occurring every 2 years since 2016, or 2014. Since 2014. 2014, 16, 18, now they were projecting it was going to occur in 2020. So I went to the CDC's website to find out, really, was there none of these polio-like illness outbreaks in the odd years, sure enough, every year from 2014 till 2020 had polio-like illness called acute flaccid myelitis.
Neil, looking at all the research that you've poured over the decades, what do you think what were some of the most striking facts you uncovered to basically prove the case, put the nail in the coffin? A lot of people would say, look, I get it. You've heard this anecdotal data. You know, you've got friends that have had children that are autistic. They blame that on the vaccine. But look, this is just disgruntled parents needing someone to blame. And you really don't have proof for what you're saying. Is there any nail in the coffin here? Is there any telltale sign that we know and can prove that, and the data shows that? And if so, what is that data? What's that proof? What's the science that backs that point up?
I was honored to be able to collaborate on 2 studies with Dr. Brian Hooker. Dr. Brian Hooker is very well respected in the scientific and medical communities. He's a professor at Simpson University, and he is also the chief science officer at Children's Health Defense, and a biologist by trade. And he and I in 2020 and 2021, we collaborated on 2 separate papers where we looked at vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. And we had access to the data from several medical doctors who admitted children into their practice who were both vaccinated and unvaccinated. And that was how we had access to this data. And we analyzed that data, and what we discovered was that children that received vaccines were anywhere from 4 to over 12 times more likely to develop various types of negative or adverse health outcomes. We looked at various conditions, including everything from allergies and autism, gastrointestinal disorders, ear infections. We looked at developmental disabilities, and out of all of these conditions, every single one of these conditions that we looked at, the vaccinated children, like I said, they had odds ratios ranging anywhere from 4 to over 12 times more likely to develop these adverse conditions after having been vaccinated. So clearly, the unvaccinated children are healthier in this respect in comparison to the children that are receiving these multiple vaccines. So the parents, they are being gaslit by health authorities. And in fact, it was the CDC was negligent in not conducting this study on their own. The National Institutes of Health should have conducted this study, or the World Health Organization should have conducted this study. And there's a good reason why these health authorities have never conducted these studies. And that's because they know exactly what they're going to find, and they don't want that information to be out there. So absolutely, parents need to investigate these studies that Dr. Brian Hooker and I conducted. They're free studies that can be downloaded. One study was published by the Journal of Translational Medicine, and the other study was published by Sage Open Medicine. And they can be freely downloaded, and I highly recommend that they are downloaded. And there are 2 other studies that I want to mention. There are 2 other studies that have also looked at vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. And in 2017, Dr. Anthony Mawson, Mawson is how you spell his last name. He conducted a study where he looked at vaccinated and unvaccinated children, and he found the same thing that Dr. Brian Hooker and I found in our papers, and that is that vaccinated children are statistically significantly more likely to develop adverse health outcomes, to be diagnosed with these various health conditions, if they were vaccinated versus children that were unvaccinated. And then just recently, Dr. Paul Thomas is a pediatrician in Oregon, and he collaborated with Dr. James Lyons Weiler on a very important paper that also looked at vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. Unfortunately, right now, it's not only difficult to get your paper published in a medical journal that's indexed by the National Library of Medicine if you have found problems with vaccines. Not only is that difficult, but if you do become successful at getting your paper published in a reputable journal, then you have to be concerned about whether there's going to be a concerted effort to have that paper retracted somewhere later on down the road. There's a movement right now to retract all papers that have found that there are problems with vaccines. And unfortunately, Dr. Paul Thomas's and James Lyons Weiler's paper was retracted. But the reasons for that retraction were really sincerely bogus. That's also a very important study. So there's 4 studies that I highly recommend that everybody get a hold of, get the PDF of those studies, download them, and hold on to them. Because I'm telling you right now, what's happening is health authorities are making an effort to destroy the control group. Okay, a lot of people say to me, they ask me, Mr. Miller, why is there such an incredible movement, such pressure to have parents vaccinate their children against their will when roughly 95% of all children have received all of the vaccines that are recommended by the health authorities? So why are they going after that last 5%? What is that about? Well, I'll tell you exactly what that's about. They want to destroy the control group. Criminals often do 2 things, right? First thing they do is they commit their crime. But often, the second thing that they do is they try to cover up their crime. Well, guess what? Dr. Brian Hooker and I would never have been able to conduct our study if the medical doctors that accepted vaccinated and unvaccinated children into their practice weren't able or weren't allowed to accept those unvaccinated children into their practice. And there's lots of pressure on medical doctors to no longer allow unvaccinated children into their practice. And there's lots of pressure on families of unvaccinated children to have them vaccinated. And the reason for this, one of the reasons for this, is not only to increase their revenue stream for the pharmaceutical companies, but to destroy the evidence, because without those unvaccinated children, we cannot do the studies that compare the vaccinated to the unvaccinated children to determine exactly what are these vaccines doing to the health of our nation, to the health of children around the world. And so that's critically important.
Thank you for sharing that, Neil. I appreciate the background on the 4 studies. I appreciate you sharing some of the core tools that people can look at for some of these studies. You're referencing 4 key studies to look at so that people can be aware of them. And Dr. Paul Thomas shared that study with me last year, and I felt like there was really something to what he was doing there, looking at the numbers, going through it in detail of disease categories, finding that it was very much night and day. It was shocking, even for him, when it came to that, thinking that perhaps, or likely, that the children that were partially vaccinated would be the most healthy because they would be the ones that would ward off some of these other unwanted diseases. But in fact, it was the unvaccinated children that were far healthier. And because of that, in my recent interview with him, he's talked about the fact that he has very mixed feelings about his previous work, and that the vaccine-friendly plan is not as friendly as he wanted it to be, and it's not something that he stands by anymore, which is very telling when people are renouncing their own work. I mean, talk about surrender of ego. It's
Dr. Paul Thomas is a hero. And Dr. Paul Thomas is a compassionate pediatrician, very rare in the medical community right now. And I have a lot of respect for Dr. Paul Thomas. And Dr. Paul Thomas, he also wrote a book. I've written several books, and my books are obviously I'm more direct in how I address the vaccine issue. In my books, for example, Miller's Review of Critical Vaccine Studies, I summarize 400 studies that were critical of vaccines. These are studies published in peer-reviewed medical journals that document safety and efficacy problems. Now, Paul Thomas also wrote an excellent book, and many people love his book, and they use it as a Bible. And but in Paul Thomas's book, he does recommend that children receive various aluminum-containing vaccines. What he's looking for is the schedule that has the least amount of aluminum, and that's very good to try to remove as much aluminum as possible from the schedule. So I haven't heard that Paul Thomas is now, concerned about some of the recommendations that he's made, but I can understand it because from my perspective, you don't want any aluminum in your baby. You want to, I'm sorry, but the aluminum is clearly, the studies clearly show that aluminum is neurotoxic, and that aluminum can cause autoimmune disorders, and so I respect Paul Thomas if he's now questioning whether or not he should have made some other types of recommendations. One of the things that they went after Paul Thomas for is because of his data. The reason they're trying to take away Paul Thomas's license, and they tried to retract his paper immediately after it was published. And I think they're going after him because they're angry that he's accepting unvaccinated patients, unvaccinated children into his practice. And because I think Paul Thomas has a huge collection of children that are unvaccinated and don't have autism. Okay, right now the rates of autism, approximately 1 out of 42 children right now in the United States are autistic. And Dr. Paul Thomas has the largest collection, one of the largest collections of children that are unvaccinated, and he does not have autism. It's very, very low rate of autism in his practice of unvaccinated children. And that is very concerning to the health authorities. The pharmaceutical industry is not happy about having that information being available. And I think that's one of the reasons they went after Dr. Paul Thomas's paper with Dr. James Lyons Weiler. And I believe that's why they are ultimately trying to take away Dr. Paul Thomas's license. It has nothing to do with whether or not he's a good practitioner. He's one of the best. Okay, and if you were to interview Dr. Paul Thomas's patients and the families that he works with, almost every single one of them that I'm aware of absolutely love him, and they're upset and concerned about how he's being castigated and being targeted by the medical and pharmaceutical industry.
Thank you for your commentary on that. I appreciate that. And yeah, you'd love to see this interview. I'll send it to you, Neil. You really love to see it because it is a very telling moment in the interview. And I said point blank, it sounds like you've completely changed your tune. And he says, I have. And he said, this is a war on our children, so I'm willing to do what it takes now. And so he'd always believed, or shortly after that study, he really did believe that in what I'm saying, that all vaccines were damaging. But he believes in informed consent. He gives people those options, and then he was trying to toe the line so he could help as many people as he could. But then as things have evolved, the way that he can help the most people that he can is by completely speaking his truth. And So I think he's grown in that way. I think he went through an evolution of growth in his own character. That's to me what it takes to win this war, to speak truth and to fight this fight.
Well, I always accept medical doctors, scientists, and medical journalists that have to couch their language and have to toe this fine line between speaking out and being honest with parents and families, and yet not going overboard with how they speak out. And so there's a lot of medical doctors that are aware that essentially all vaccines have the potential to cause serious adverse reactions, but they will recommend vaccines in certain ways, and they will say, well, I've vaccinated. They will often vaccinate their own children. So there's I have a lot of respect for anybody that is on our side speaking out to wake people up to the problems with vaccines.
Awesome. Now, Neil, is there anything else you'd like to share in regard to this topic and why it's important? Anything else that comes to mind that you feel like the public should know about?
Right now, currently, as things stand worldwide, we are in a dire period historically, and people have to understand that the pressure that we are under to accept more and more drugs, more and more pharmaceutical products into our bodies, and to be told that we don't have control over our bodies anymore. A lot of people respect this idea that it's my body, my choice when it comes to certain decisions, except when it is related to vaccines or pharmaceutical products. And then all of a sudden, it's not your body and it's not your choice, and you're being told that you're selfish if you don't take these vaccines, give these vaccines, every single vaccine, to your child and to your family. Well, I'll tell you something. About 20 years ago, the dialogue started to shift, where in the financial pages that you were seeing, where they were talking, pharmaceutical company executives and Bloomberg and others were speaking about the fact that the childhood vaccination schedule is saturated. Now, what does that mean, that the childhood vaccination schedule is saturated? Well, it means that there are so many vaccines being given to children during infancy and early childhood that it's very difficult to add new vaccines to the childhood schedule. And so it's hard to continue to increase the revenue stream that these pharmaceutical companies are experiencing. And so they wanted to go after the adolescent and adult markets. And so they were going to put into place efforts over the next several years to begin to mandate vaccines for adults, so that in order to work, or to keep your job, or to fly in a plane, or to go out into society as an adult, you were going to have to to take an MMR vaccine, or a pertussis vaccine, or a pneumonia vaccine, or a shingles vaccine, an annual flu vaccine, or whatever else that they told you that you need to keep your job. Well, now with the pandemic, with COVID-19, I call COVID-19, I call SARS-2 the gateway drug. It's the gateway drug to the health passport, and the health passport is just the advancement, or the natural evolution of what I was seeing 20 years ago when they were talking about trying to institute these adolescent and adult mandates. And with this health passport, the goal is to eventually get all people around the world in line, and to have to take a series of vaccines in order to participate in the benefits of society. Right now, we've been told that the unvaccinated are not entitled to the benefits of society. You can't go to a concert. You can't go on a plane. You can't go keep your job. You can't. You might not be able to go shopping at some point if it gets that draconian. But that's where it's headed with these health passports, and the COVID-19 was the gateway drug to institute these health passports. And we are in a reprieve period right now. We're doing this interview right now in the spring of 2022, and I suspect that during the summer we'll have a slight reprieve from all of the intense pressure to vaccinate and the oppression, the oppressive oppression that we're experiencing. But that come fall, they'll probably have a new COVID vaccine for some new variant, and they're going to probably combine that with the influenza vaccine, and they will make another push to get everybody signed up for those health passports. And so you have to fight this tooth and nail, because this is a very dystopian future where they're trying to lead us into, and you will lose control over your own bodies, and you will lose control over your own ability to maintain a livelihood, to support your family, and to take care of your own children if you're unvaccinated and don't take every drug that they deem is necessary for you to take. And so I'm just giving you a little preview of where we're headed if we can't wake up enough people in time. I've been doing this for 35 years, and that has always been my goal, to wake parents up before the damage is done. I've heard too many horror stories by parents that have come to me after the damage has been done, and then they decide to begin doing their research, and by that time their child may be autistic, the child may have neurological or immunological damage, and it's very hard to reverse or remedy the harms that have been done due to the vaccination programs. The CDC and the FDA and the World Health Organization, in my opinion, have been captured by Big Pharma. The media has been captured by Big Pharma. Big Tech has been captured by Big Pharma. They are censoring in accordance with the wants and desires of Big Pharma. I believe that the Big Pharma and medical industry, Big Tech, the media, are all right now in collaboration to move and to herd the American people, the people of Australia, Canada, UK, Europe, and around the world down a very dystopian path. And we need to wake people up before it gets much worse. And so I'm sorry to be the bearer of this type of news, but at this point, it's all hands on deck. And if you are aware of these problems, find your niche, find your niche area of expertise, find an area where you can contribute and where you can help. If you have knowledge in any way, if you have friends that are going to vaccinate their children and they have not yet done their research, help them with their research. Now, if they've made up their decisions, move on to somebody that's interested in what you have to share. Don't waste your time on those who are not interested in what you have to say. But carry on, and everybody, I wish you well. We're all in this together, and we can win this war against humanity if we all can wake up and work together in collaboration and understand exactly what we're up against. I send my love to everybody, and I support all of you in this effort to move forward to a more utopian society, not a dystopian one.
So the CDC put out a warning in 2020 that in the months of August 2020 to November 2020, you're going to see a huge outbreak of children average age 5 years old with what's called acute flaccid myelitis, a polio-like illness, meaning kids are going to have paralyzed legs first, paralyzed arms, and half of their faces. Okay? And so I went into research. How would they know that this is going to occur in the future? I mean, they're announcing it in August, but they said the reason why they were getting this warning in 2020 is because it was occurring in every even year from 2014, 16, 18, and now 2020. So I went to the CDC to see, is it really not being diagnosed at all in the odd years? Well, that wasn't true. On the CDC's own website, if you type in acute flaccid myelitis, it brings up this outbreaks calendar and click it, and it actually gives you every year. Every year since 2014, there have been kids diagnosed with acute flaccid myelitis, but each year there's a little bit of a spike in the even years over the odd years, okay, for 2017 and 19. So they're like, it's going to happen again in 2020 because the last big one was in 2018. So acute flaccid myelitis, I needed to learn how long has the CDC known about acute flaccid myelitis. So on CDC's website, I went to the search engine and just typed in acute flaccid myelitis. And then I was shocked to see a document from 2001 where the CDC says acute flaccid myelitis occurs from the polio virus derived from children's polio vaccines in the Philippines. So they had all these Filipino children, they're injecting them with this polio virus vaccine, and they were developing paralyzed legs, arms, and half their faces. That force, 40% of all those children is permanent for life. And the CDC said in 2001, this is caused by the polio virus found in the polio vaccines for children. So now I know there's a connection to vaccines. So I first started going to look back and see, well, are there any polio virus vaccines that have been put in or approved since 2013 or 14? Because the CDC said this polio-like illness started in children in 2014, 16, and 18. Only to find out there's 4 brand new polio viruses vaccines that were approved, brand new, never been used before, in children average age 5 to 11 years old in 2013. The year before these polio-like illnesses started getting reported to the CDC in 2014. So we know the CDC knows that there's a direct connection to vaccines and vaccine injury from a virus in the polio shots. However, it still didn't make any sense that they would say this is going to occur in a whole bunch of children in America between the months of August and November. So I wanted to know what other shots have been given out during this one season every year since 2014 that could sum up how it is the CDC knows that in 2020 there was going to be a polio-like illness called acute flaccid myelitis. And what I found out is there are flu shots that were approved for children that were never approved for children before in 2013 and started getting administered in 2014. And this is when you see the first. Then I went to the FDA's website to find out of these new shots for the flu for children that have been approved since 2013, how many of those manufacturers were awarded lots to be purchased and then passed out for each year since 2014. And it falls in line like clockwork. Each of the even years, 2014, 16, and 18, those new flu vaccine manufacturers were awarded greater lots in 2014, a little bit more in 2016, a little bit more in 2018. 3 of them were given the largest awarded contract to purchase the most of their flu shots in 2020. This is how they knew that this was going to happen. And how did I know it? I looked up each of these flu shots that were now being awarded to be put in children for the first time ever since 2013. And each of those shots has in post-market reporting, just go on drugs.com, type in each of these 3 flu shots that they're giving to children now. Post-marketing reads, side effects reported, neurological, Guillain-Barré syndrome, paralyzed limbs, half of their faces called Bell's palsy. You have to understand, the flu shots cause Bell's palsy. They also, on the CDC's own website, each flu shot states less than 6 weeks after each of the flu shots, there is a reported known major side effect of Guillain-Barré syndrome. Guillain-Barré syndrome and acute flaccid myelitis are identical. And my warning has been, and the reason why I went and started actually putting out all of these media interviews about this warning that was actually put out in 2020 that now I became aware of in 2021? The reason why I had to go into the media is because the CDC once again was lying to the American public. They actually are pushing out warnings. They did it even this year. When the USA Today said they were fact-checking me that the CDC didn't put out this warning, I've already had medical doctors contact me and say their hospital got the warning in August of 2021 to expect acute flaccid myelitis paralyzed children coming into your hospitals this year. But the CDC didn't put it out in the media. They just sent it all to all the hospitals to be on the lookout for this. And the reason why they wanted to do that is because the CDC wants hospitals to call it acute flaccid myelitis in children. Acute being sudden, flaccid meaning you can't move it, can't use your arm, can't use your legs, half your face is now paralyzed. They want the hospitals to diagnose it acute flaccid myelitis because they don't want it to the CDC doesn't want the hospitals to diagnose that these children are being paralyzed with something called Guillain-Barré syndrome. If they never got these alerts from the CDC, the doctors would have written Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a known side effect of the flu shot. So the CDC started putting out these alerts. You're going to call it, is what they said, you're going to call it acute flaccid myelitis when you see paralyzed children, average age 5 years old in America, coming into the hospital each even year, between August and November 2020. If you look at the definitions of Guillain-Barré syndrome and acute flaccid myelitis, they are identical. If you look at the Lancet research study on acute flaccid myelitis, it actually states in the Lancet's medical peer-reviewed journal research online publication, it states that acute flaccid myelitis, there is no medical diagnostic test that actually can differentiate acute flaccid myelitis from any other neurological disorder like Guillain-Barré syndrome. The CDC is actually going to paralyze tons of children along with the FDA. They are going to paralyze the legs of these children, the arms of their children, and half of their faces. If I take you back, I'm going to point this out, if it's okay. I'm going to point you back to the actual slide I showed you a minute ago from the FDA in October 22nd, 2020, and then we'll wrap this up. The FDA published a list of side effects to be expected to be seen. Do you see what the first one is that they put on there?
Yeah, Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Guillain-Barré syndrome. Do you know what Guillain-Barré syndrome?
Yeah.
It is a polio-like illness where you have ascending paralysis. You can't use your legs, you can't use your arms, half of your faces, for some, will actually become paralyzed. It's the exact same definition of acute flaccid myelitis. Do not be fooled. These children will be paralyzed with the mRNA flu shots, with the mRNA COVID-19 shots that they're now giving to all children. And I expect that there will be a huge outbreak of not only myocarditis that they said will happen from these shots, there's going to be a huge outbreak of a polio-like illness in children when their nervous systems are being damaged, leading to paralysis of their limbs and half of their faces. It is actually Guillain-Barré syndrome, not acute flaccid myelitis. So I had to go into the media to make everybody aware the CDC's lying. It is not acute flaccid myelitis. They're lying to hospitals to call it that so it doesn't look like they're liable for something they knew the shots were going to cause all along.
Wow. That's the reason. There you go.
Fact check that.
Yeah.
Go look at the Lancet. Acute flaccid myelitis cannot be differentiated with any medical testing being anything different than any other neurological disorder. Guess what Guillain-Barré syndrome is? A neurological disorder that has the exact same symptoms. Acute flaccid myelitis is Guillain-Barré syndrome in children.
And it's been caused by the flu shots.
Flu shots, and now the coming COVID-19 shots. They just told you, the FDA said Guillain-Barré syndrome is going to be a side effect of the COVID-19 shots. It's already been reported.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Currently. This is a great, great onslaught of children's physical health. Could be permanent or life-threatening.
There's more than enough evidence to substantiate these vaccines are part of a much larger agenda to cause intentional harm. One of the main premises for this is that our experts have seen firsthand that COVID has been extremely mild in children and teens, and there's absolutely no need for them to get a vaccine. And yet, they're boasting for every child to get vaxxed, along with all the other harmful vaccines that are on the childhood schedule. we've already learned from our experts that none of the vaccines on the schedule have been tested properly, and adding to this list is the COVID jab. If this vaccine and many of the others are not needed, and we know this because the studies clearly show that unvaxxed kids are much healthier than vaxxed kids, then what is the real reason for mandating them? It's important for parents to acknowledge that these are designed to cause serious harm, and we need to collectively take a stand to protect our children, our future generation, from these dangerous bioweapons. Hey, it's Jonathan, and thank you so much for joining me in this episode. I hope that this was a blessing. We are getting to the root cause of what's going on here, and we're very concerned about the future of children. This is why we're working with people like Maddie DeGarre, the 12-year-old, now 13, that was injured in the Pfizer clinical trial. It's been 13 months. She's still suffering. Her brain is swelling. She's losing eyesight. She's feeding through a tube. She's in a wheelchair. She's not able to move from the waist down. And she's suffering, but with God's help, we will turn this around with the help of people that are generous and thoughtful and excellent in their craft, in their work, in their medical profession. With your love and support and help, with the financial support that we get that helps us to help fund this operation by people owning our series. It's that simple. We are a company that's built around generosity and giving back. This is part of the reason why right now we're doing a massive donation in Kenya for the famine, because this issue has not just caused a breakdown for people's health, but also for the whole financial economy for all around the world. So we're seeing people on the brink of starvation in Kenya. We're donating $100,000 to help people in need in this circumstance, which is so the company Health Seeker, we are giving back to find out ways that we can make a difference, to change the circumstances in the world, to change people's lives, to change children that are being injured, to get information out so you can help change people's lives, to use free protocols that people can just do from their home. It doesn't matter. Nobody needs to give anyone even exchange money in that context, because we're just getting help to people that need it and doing the best that we can. Let's be generous, everybody. Let's give to others. Share these materials with people and make sure that people have this knowledge, how to reverse vaccine injury. People are silent about it because they're ashamed. You need to bring it up with people. You need to let them know. And I'm here for you to help give you the materials, to help you navigate these situations, to help people. And inside of our question and answer sessions that you'll get in the program, in any of the programs, you'll get invited to our question and answer sessions, and we'll be answering your questions specifically. You can ask your own personal questions. It's really wonderful. You get to network and connect in that way, in that setting as well. So thank you so much for considering this. Simply click the buttons or the banner below this video, and I can't wait to see you inside the program.